All right. So again, I know I kind of navigated away, but can everyone see Owner Insight's office here with my mouse moving on the page?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So the bulk of what we're going to be looking at here today is really going to be the construction tab, which you will see here, and you see it now. But before I dive into that, I always like to kind of give a brief intro in terms of where you typically will land. And that is called the My Projects page. This page is here for you as basically a central hub. All the projects that your accounts will be linked to and will be included on will show up here in the center of this page. Anytime you get to this page, you will see that you can always go into whichever project you're needing to work. Now, you see here on the left, these are recent projects or projects that you have recently visited. If you're on more than one, you can have, I think, up to 6 here. Sometimes it's 5, just kind of depending. And so these are just quick links. So if I follow this, I can hop into my project. But if I need to go back to my projects page, click this link or this image in the top left-hand corner, it'll take you back. Now, that's really kind of some key navigational items, but the bigger items that I want to point out and that I like to point out are how to get support. So if you're in here, I know we have some users who have not used OwnerInsite before. So in here, once you have your account set up, you've logged in, you'll see this string of blue words here in the top right-hand corner. The request support will email our entire organization to include our CEO and owner, Steve Harper. So definitely use that if you have any questions. Now, when I send out this recording, you will obviously have all of my direct contact information to include my cell phone, desk phone, our toll-free number, which calls our entire organization, and obviously my email address. So all of that will come in my email signature, and feel free to use it. The other item here for support in the lower right-hand corner of that My Projects page is a chat window. You can use this chat window. It is only located on this page though. But outside of that, if you're here and you have a quick question, feel free to pipe in on the chat. We'll get a notification saying, hey, your HubSpot chat has been initiated. The challenge here is we don't actually see who's on the other end. So a lot of times if you just put in your question, our response to you is going to be, who are we speaking with, right? So just introduce yourself, let us know what you're doing, where you're at, and then input your question. That way we can kind of streamline getting you an answer. The only other resources that are probably worth pointing out on this page for you all, the videos page, that will be where you can access our private YouTube channel. Again, it is private, so you cannot go to youtube.com, pull open your, the search bar and type in OwnerInsite tutorials. You have to go to ownerinsite.com, click on that link, and that's how you will access the YouTube, the private YouTube channel. There is also a help contents here located under this blue box with the white question mark. Again, these are just resources for you. I want to point them out. I like to point them out so you know that they're there. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Clayton or anyone in our organization. So we're here to help. With that, before I dive into the project, does anyone have any questions in terms of this page or how to get a hold of resources?
I do just want to point out that the YouTube videos are incredibly helpful, and if you have not watched them, I do recommend that you do watch them, because most of the questions that I continuously am asking Kyle or that people are asking me are actually answered in the YouTube videos. And at this point, anything that you would have asked before would not have been addressed by YouTube videos because you were doing development. But now that we're transitioning to construction, almost everything in the construction modules are being used exactly like OwnerInsite has designed them to be used. So the YouTube videos are very helpful.
Yep. And we're actually updating them. That's something Clayton is going through, and he's created some new ones. He's revamped some of the older ones to align with more current processes. So those will be getting uploaded here. But with no other questions, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hop into a project. It's just a demo project here. And we'll kind of go through some navigational things and we'll dive right into construction. But before I do that, I do just want to confirm or let you guys know, feel free to unmute yourself if you're muted, or just, say, hey, Kyle, shut up for a second. I have a question. No offense taken on my end. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Don't feel like you have to wait. Just pipe in and we'll get it answered and we'll move on. But without any further ado, so this is the project from an entirety standpoint. Some of you may not have all of them because they may not be pertinent to what you're doing, but at the end of the day, the biggest item here, and you can get to it either through this left-hand pane, top down, or through the navigational, the top horizontal navigational pane. They're really the same thing here. It's just a matter of user preference. But kind of the two roads diverged in the woods, but they both take you to the same spot, right? So feel free to use either one of these. Now, where we're going to start today is probably the RFI section, right? So within the RFIs, we do initially have a grid. On a new construction project, this is going to be empty, but to give you an idea as to what this grid looks like when it's populated, you can see on the screen, there's just some demo items going through on this. We have our title listed here. These are linked, so you click the title, you open that specific RFI. We have, the initiator, who started it, what organization that person is with, how many days outstanding is that item, and then who was it sent to. If you don't see a to user here like this, that means it was sent to an org, which we'll go over here in a second. And then on the far right, you have your RFI status. So in progress means we haven't actually submitted that to anybody yet, which means it's still under this person's name. So this one still sitting in progress. Submitted means, hey, we've actually formulated our RFI content. We've submitted it to someone, but we haven't received a response on it. But here in green, you can see we've actually, those are the ones we do have a response on. And then this retracted was an initially inputted RFI, got pulled back because maybe there was a mistake and we needed to make a quick correction. So we reissue a new one. And so the retracted one, the original, will have that retracted status. Those are the key RFI statuses. Now, the thing about this grid is you can organize and structure it exactly as you need. For instance, if you're the architect, maybe you really only care about the submitted ones, right? You can filter by status here. Just click that oil filter, check your submitted one. You're going to filter out anything other than submitted. The other thing to keep in mind is you can drag and drop and sort all of this however you want. So I could say, I want to break out, to the user. So now we're saying, okay, the blank RFIs, the ones that were not sent to any specific user, just to an org, they kind of go on top, and then we break it out by who has a responsibility to answer each RFI. And the benefit here is that you can sort this however you want to see it, but it's not going to impact anybody else. So that means, Joanne could look at it one way, Curtis can look at it another way, and then Lisa could have her way she wants to look at it, right? But at the end of the day, it's tied to their login, so they're not impacting anyone else. But because it's tied to your logins, if you navigate to a second project, that means however I have it set up in one project, it's going to carry over to another. So that includes these filters here. So a filter may apply on one project that does not apply on another. Well, you might see something like no data on that other project where there are RFIs. Click this reset grid button down here in the bottom left-hand corner to reset everything to default, and that'll likely resolve that issue. Does anyone have any questions about the grid itself? I just wanted to point it out really quickly because it's fairly consistent throughout the platform, but they all operate the same way. So if anyone has any questions, definitely now is a good time to ask. Silence is golden. Okay.
I do want to point one thing out. So when we
Sure.
get into the construction phase, for our purposes, the RFIs is the request for information. And so the GC, the architect, in lots of cases, the housing authority, for example, or even Allied Orion, you all can submit an RFI and say something along the lines of, we want to know when, when the doors will be put on, or something like that. And then you can assign it to someone and ask them, when the doors are going to be put on. And it keeps track of, what is being done on the project. A lot of the RFIs are, asking about colors or, different things. So we'll often, the GC will put on there, I need to know what color the windows are going to be or what color the brick is going to be. And then the architect is responding, and then there are some approvals that have to happen. So in certain cases, they'll ask the housing authority or they'll ask BGC for approval. So that's what a lot of the RFIs are used for. It's requests for information.
Yep. And so generally speaking, what I tend to see from a user side is the GC tends to create them. Now, in the case where maybe you have the HOA asking a question or BGC needs a question, or anyone else on the party, you can certainly go through the creation portion of this and submit it to someone specifically. But within the scope of the project, generally what I see is the GC is creating them, and they are typically submitting them to the architect. Now, there is a bit of an item to discuss here, in that in those normal instances, typically, there's a determination made from the architect. Do we prefer to receive this as a group, or would we rather this feed through one specific person to kind of act as that, I don't know, the distributor of information, right? So in the case where your architect says, yeah, send it to me and I will close them out and I will distribute information internally, then you would select the user and you would select that user from the dropdown. If it's a better situation for the firm to say, hey, we'd prefer to get this as a group and allow any one of us to answer that RFI, then we can send it to the organization and say, hey, look, here we go. So now we're all going to be notified, and whoever can get to that answer first will have the responsibility of closing that RFI out. Have you guys, do you have a preferred approach either on the BGC side or architecture side? I'm assuming we have someone from either, but
I don't think we have anyone from the GC or the architecture side, and
okay.
I don't think there's a preferred approach, but what you described is typically what happens. I know Dustin's on the call as well, but Dustin's not necessarily on this project. But usually that exactly what's happened is what's happened.
Okay. Dustin, you guys get them, I can't remember. Do you get them as an individual or do you guys go org? I'm not sure if he has audio or not.
I think he gets them individually.
Okay. Ultimately, I'll distribute the recording, Joanne. But yeah, we might maybe at like an OAC meeting or something, maybe go over that just to figure out, hey, what do we, how do you guys prefer it? It's a good conversation piece just to make sure we're all on the same page. But I'll go ahead and submit this to my org here. You can see from a creation standpoint, it's really straightforward, guys. It's title, who you're sending it to, the date you want a response by, and then the question. Now, in some instances, you may not have that request for information here. It may be in a document, right? So if that's the case, you could always erase this and say see attached and then hit save. Upon doing that, we're going to lock in all this information, scroll down to the very bottom of the page, upload new document, and I think you guys are familiar with this part. Find your attachment, open, start upload once it's in the queue, and there you will have your attachment. And you can see all of our details have remained untouched. All I need to do is, at this point, submit my RFI. Now, anyone on this project with OwnerInsite is going to be notified via email, and it will suggest, hey, there's been a new RFI created. Go take a look at it. And then when we have an answer, input that here, submit response. or upload an attachment and then, you know, submit response there. And
Hey,
now we can,
Kyle,
yeah.
Dustin's trying to say something, but it's weird because he can't unmute himself or doesn't have the ability to unmute himself or anything like that. And I looked on the participant screen and it doesn't have him on video or unmuting, which I think is weird.
He might have a number, like is he using his phone? Looks like he
I
just
don't know.
dropped his phone off to, I'm not sure. I'll keep an eye on it and see if we can get him there.
But Dustin, you can also, yeah, you're using his phone. Dustin, you can go on your chat line as well, or you can just text me and I can ask the questions. So when he's using his phone, how can he talk into it?
It should be just that number, like the meeting number. He has to call in, input the code and his participant ID, and then it's just like talking on the phone.
Okay. All right. Did you hear that, Dustin? He says thumbs up. Awesome.
He says thumbs up. Okay. All right.
Yeah. He said Zoom told him to hit *3 to unmute, but it doesn't work. I don't know. Okay.
No.
He'll text. He'll text any questions.
Okay. At any rate, so that's kind of how that works. Now, from a BG side of things, is there going to be an approver or anything there, Joanne, for construction items? I can't remember if you
Yeah.
guys have that.
We do have, we used to set up approvers, but quite honestly, it became a little bit cumbersome because we had this really big hierarchy of approvals and it just didn't work for us. So at this point, the only person that really needs to approve it is the person that it's linked to. Yeah.
Okay.
And then usually the GC will send it to the architect. The architect will then email us and say, hey, can you take a look at this? Can you approve this? And so what we do is we'll put in the comments, VGC has reviewed and approved, or, you know, if HAS needs to, you know, the Housing Authority of Springfield needs to review and approve, we'll ask them to review it and approve it in the comments. But we're not doing the approval process just because, as you know, they can't move on without the approval.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Beautiful. So for the recording sake, I'm going to just address that really quickly and clearly. So the GC will submit it to the architect. The architect will then forward it to BGC and I guess the HOA as well.
Not
And
HOA, the Housing Authority, PHA. We call it the PHA.
PHA. So BGC and the PHA, who will then provide their stamp of approval. At that point, it will go back to the architect to close out in OwnerInsite.
That is correct.
Okay, cool. Does anybody have any questions about the RFI process? Silence is golden. All right. Submittals operate, again, you can see the grid is relatively similar. Submittals do operate the exact same way. Everyone, in terms of the workflow and how you create them, you'll enter a title, a response needed by date. You can input a spec number here, whether you create them on your own or if you use the master format spec number book. This is built in here. It is in the dropdown. You can see here, at least initially, I can only go to 0022. However, if I start typing, I can update that drop-down list to all the divs that match that criteria I enter there. So let's say I just select one. I'm going to submit it to a user. Now here's kind of the difference between the submittal and the RFI. The submittal has an extra mandatory field here for tracked in warranty. If that product data carries a warranty with it, we ask that this is selected as yes. Upon this being submitted and approved by the architect, well, and I guess the PHA and BGC, what would happen is we will automatically generate a warranty item as it relates to this submittal. So we could go to the warranty tab now and see we have our BGC Windows warranty formulated. The purpose of this is to generate a list of known warranty items throughout the construction project to ease the challenges typically associated with closeout. And again, all it is a quick yes selection in an already mandatory field on the submittal form. So if you have any questions with that, definitely feel free to send them our way, but it's a quick, easy drop down, and then everything else is just a standard submittal process. If you select no here, it just becomes an ordinary submittal without any warranty functionality tied to it. And then the form itself, again, guys, is a similar process for creating a submittal as it was in RFI. Title, who you send it to, date you need it by, and then get an answer back. Does anyone have any questions on the submittals?
If it's submitted without the warranty being checked, yes, can it be changed later?
Yeah, through admin rights it can, or Lisa, you always have the ability to come back and say, hey, look, let's just create the warranty from scratch if you
Okay.
identify any of those.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, silence is golden. Joanne, were you wanting to go over field reports, ASIs, issues, punch lists? I know in the email it was predominantly RFIs and submittals, but
Yeah, actually with Brian on the line, Brian actually does the field reports. So if Brian, if you want to touch upon field reports, and right now all we're doing is actually just uploading them on the communications tab. So we're not necessarily using the OwnerInsite field report module, but we do want to use that. So if you could go over that, that would be helpful.
yeah. So I'll let Brian kind of explain, his process here in a sec, but from a form standpoint, it's relatively straightforward with the fields already kind of detailed out. You'll have a title, you'll have the weather.gov functionality here, so you can make sure you're getting the weather from the job site on that day. We have under the reps comments, just general observations, personnel who are on site, any work hours that are being tracked or needing to be tracked here. You can obviously list out equipment that's on site, work performed, obviously your materials received, and then your QA QC type of processes that you're going through. Any issues spotted you can tie to this field report. And then attachments for documents, and then photos for actual photo files that you take on site. Those can be uploaded kind of in bulk here as well. Now, upon completing this form and hitting submit, this blue submit button, there's a 48-hour timer to continue to make changes. After that, all the information locks as is. And the only way you could change it is going through BGC or really us who still have to go through BGC. So are there any questions on the form itself or how to go through it? It's pretty straightforward. I think most people get it, but.
All right. So Brian, I definitely want us to start using this form for this Keystone project because we haven't in the past. For the Housing Authority, Don, I want Chuck and you all to use this form as well. And then the only thing that I'm going to ask is that on the field report, we actually put the units that are ready. So for example, if we are walking units or doing an owner's walk of units, I'd like to be able to capture that on these field reports as well. When we're going out to do the field reports, Brian is looking at safety issues. We are looking at, we're looking at health and safety issues. We're looking at the units that are ready. We're looking at any anomalies. So Brian, do you have any objection at this point to using this particular report?
No, not at all. But we actually do have a template that we have been using that contains just about all the same information in the owner insight form. So my question would be is, do we want to utilize this owner insight form, or can we simply just upload what we have along with the photos?
Yeah, I think that I want you to try both and then come back and tell me which one works better.
Oh,
Because since this one is already a fillable one,
yeah,
and that's why I said that, you know, at the very beginning, I said Brian has a field report that we use.
yeah.
But it's going to kind of be up to you, Brian, how you want to handle this project. I personally think that the more customized everything is and, you know, using these templates, the better off we are, because then everybody can use the same type of thing. And then I think, Kyle, are you able to add, you know, in the add new, are you able to add another part?
In the here,
Joanne, so we actually have began utilizing the field reports tab and actually uploading field reports to the tab. And the architect, for instance, North Little Rock Rad family, when Collie conducts his field reports, he'll upload them too, and he has his own specific template.
Right.
So I think it would, and you know, the architect's field report is it's gonna differ from the owner's field report, and also more than likely the housing authority's field report, Chuck's field report. I would think our own customized templates would be preferred over the template in Owner Insight. That way we can kind of, you know, cater our own templates to our own objectives, you know, during our field reports. That makes sense?
No, it does. And that's why at the beginning I said I wanted you to address this part. What, you know, if I know the architect is going to use his own field report and they're going to upload it to that. So I'm perfectly fine with the architect using their own report. Our customized report is perfectly fine as well. For the housing authority, if they don't have a field report that they want to use, this is a perfectly acceptable field report. Obviously, we're not going to have materials received today and those types of things, but what I want is something that is the same all the time. It doesn't have to be the same across the board. It doesn't have to be the same by Orion, the same by BGC, the same by the architect, and the same by the housing authority. But whatever the housing authority is using, I want it to be the same report all the time, if that makes sense. Just like whatever we're using, I want it to be the same all the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
totally fair. So one thing you might consider if you're gonna have, you know, the housing authority, obviously Brian and his team, the GC, the architect, they're all going to be using this specific tab, even if they're not using the form, but they're just attaching it, right? One thing you might want to kind of consider is using this categories section here. You can then tag it as whoever it is, right? So if it's the contractor, if it's the architect's field report, if it's, you know, Brian, the BGC one, if it's, you know, your PHAs, that way, you know, you're able to kind of filter the group or the list of field reports down later on, right? So you can change this category. So I didn't save that one. I'm dumb, but I didn't save it. But you could then use this category to filter down and then the date range. That way, you know, obviously over the course of a 2-year project, you're going to have several of these, especially with 3 or 4 different groups doing them. You know, that might be a benefit there just for you guys and, you know, on your end, Joanne.
So Kyle, can I add the categories in as a drop down?
Yeah, it's already in there. So this categories is right underneath the weather. And actually it doesn't really matter what form you use. This editable categories column is throughout the project itself. So
Okay.
let's see. Let's go PHA. I don't know why it didn't add. Just click that add button. Now you've got the tag.
Okay.
And I'll hit save here so I can actually show you. and you'll see that tag right here in the categories. Now we can filter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good, because that's where also for like the Orion team, that's where you want like the property inspections to go. All of those things also will go into this field report category. So I think that categories is going to be very important.
And one thing you might want to do, Brian, if you're going out and, or whoever's looking at, you know, those completed units, this title might be a good option for you to at least kind of identify the units you evaluated that day, especially if the attachment is going to contain all the relevant details, just to kind of help Joanne be able to track, okay, what units are we looking at, and that sort of thing. And so that'll kind of help identify where we're at and what we're looking at. Does that make sense?
No, that's a good point. Usually I just put BDC field report and then the date, but that would be a good idea to actually indicate what phase and units, et cetera, kind of give it, allow you to quickly look for, you know, a certain phase, especially if you're looking back into the past. That makes sense.
Yeah. Any other points you guys would like to make? Joanne, do you have anything else on this?
No, I think that it's pretty self-explanatory.
Cool. Any questions from the rest of the audience? Everyone else is really quiet. Nope. Okay. All right. So I don't know if you guys use ASIs, like if you use them for, you know, to mark change proposals or things, Joanne. But the ASI form itself is relatively straightforward. Obviously, it's generated by the architect. And then typically what we see is it is sent to the GC. You can see the difference here from our other forms is there's not really a response field, because technically speaking, there shouldn't be any cost or time impacts here, right? Now, we can obviously manipulate this to where it's sent to the GC, and then we have, you know, your housing authority and then BGC both listed as approvers on these. Jane, I'm not sure how big this has been on your other projects, but those are other capabilities we have. But it's a relatively straightforward with the same process, guys. Title, submit who you want to send it to, input your description or attachment, hit submit. And then everyone gets an email notification. If there are approvers, if that's how BGC and the Housing Authority feel comfortable working that, then certainly they could do it that way too. But relatively straightforward. Did I miss anything, Joanne, on this that you want to address?
No, I think that I think what I see the GCs using most of the time is the ASIs. They'll use the RFIs for the information, but most of the time the ASIs is what they're used for. That's what they use.
Okay. The GCs are using them?
Or the architect and the GCs.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Any other questions? Or any questions, I guess? Nope. All right, so we're going to cover issues and punch lists now. Joanne, you may have your own. I know we've been in conversation before as to how we leverage this, but that might just be for dev. I can't remember. But issues and punch lists, guys, have the exact same built-in functionality by default. They operate on basically what we call an ABA workflow. So if I'm on site, I see an issue, I come in and I create an issue, and I can obviously click advanced edit options, select OK. That's going to open me up to the full form where I can, you know, add attachments, add photos, put in a little bit more of a description here. But upon me hitting submit, I become A in the workflow. But I assign that to someone, right? So if I were to assign it to my associate Clayton, please fix hole in drywall. That may be more of a punch list item, but upon me submitting it, he gets notified, and he is the B in that ABA workflow, right? So he'll go out, he'll fix the hole in the drywall, he'll come back and he'll mark it complete. Upon him doing that, I will be notified. I will come in, I will perhaps, maybe I go on site and look at it, or maybe he posts pictures here for me to look at. I come in, I review it, I click my approvals, and that issue then closes. So it's by default, it's built out to be kind of uh, an assignment plus a quality check for the work completed. Um, but you know, it kind of depends on how you want to leverage it. We can take that off. So you basically just assign it to someone, and as soon as they mark it complete, then that item closes out. We can manipulate the built-in workflow that comes by default, but that's kind of how it's structured. The punch lists are structured the exact same way, but they're defined through a less, I guess, stringent or less urgent issue, right? So it may be something small that just needs to be cleaned up by the end of the project, but it's the exact same form, exact same functionality. The question we typically get asked is, are these built to be individual or grouped? And the answer is they were built out to be individual items. So each punch list you create is one item on maybe a list of punch lists. That's how it was developed. We do have people using it in phases. So they'll add, you know, 10 to 20 items on a one single punch list in OI. And then once all 10 or 20 of those get closed, that's when it comes in and they mark it complete, do the review, and then approve or reject the work completed. So I've seen it both ways. It was developed to be done on an individual basis, but that's kind of you know, something we can adjust. Joanne, I don't know if you want to talk about, you know, how this is being leveraged, or Brian, if you guys are using this on site. Definitely feel free to maybe walk through it a little bit more in depth, but from a technical standpoint, that's how it works.
Kyle, you pretty much nailed it. So the issues tab is generally going to be just about anyone that sees an issue, has an issue with a project, whether the management company, you know, observe something, they want to report an issue.
Hey,
Can you go
Brian.
up just a little bit?
Yeah, is it always assigned to the GC? Is that pretty consistent?
Yeah, well, we like to also assign it to the architect. That way that the architect can determine, you know, whose scope it falls under, if it in fact is something that should fall under the scope of the GC. But what I was trying to say is we would like to encourage all parties to initiate issues. You know, anything that anyone sees that has an issue they're unsure of, we encourage them to submit an issue with photos. That way we can have it addressed, whether it's something that the general contractor needs to fix, or something. That way the architect can determine if it's in their scope or not, if it's workmanship quality issue, just pretty much anything. And usually the architect needs to be the one that determines the answer to the issue, the resolution to that issue. But we like all parties to be involved regarding issues.
Gotcha.
And then can you scroll up just a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And then can you click punch list?
Yeah.
So the punch list, ideally, we want the architects to submit their punch list in OwnerInsite. And typically what we've seen are the architects utilize programs to do their punch list. That way they can get in and out, and they can create their punch list efficiently with proper documentation. So typically what we see is they will export their punch list into a PDF, and then they'll upload that. So we won't see anything probably other than an attachment. And then that attachment, once the punch list is cleared, that can be approved as being cleared in OwnerInsite.
Awesome.
So we don't see, you know, a list of all the punch items. And I mean, one, it would be extremely cumbersome to have to type out all of that when they can simply export it into a neat, clean PDF with, you know, goes by unit with a photo of every deficiency or punch item.
Understood. Understood. Does anyone have any questions regarding anything I or Brian has brought up?
No, but the issues tab will become the housing authorities and Orion's best friend. So on the issues tab, please use that tab. So an issue could be their sewer backups as a result of construction. Please add that to the issues tab. Anything that there's an issue, you know, the grab bars are falling down, the sinks are falling down, you know, whatever is happening. You want to add that to the issues tab because number one, if you send me an email, if you send Brian an email, it's just going to be in our email and we'll know about it, but that doesn't mean anybody else knows about it. And one of the things with OwnerInsite is it creates a transparency that then creates an urgency to items. And it's also a way to just kind of document the life of the project. And so as we go through construction, there's going to be things that are not going to be done well. Not because the GC doesn't want to do it well, because maybe there's a sub that's just a bad actor, or maybe something has happened, or maybe it just didn't come out the way that we thought it was going to come out. So the issues tab is important for us all to be able to upload into the issues tab and put the items that are messed up. On the punch list, exactly as Brian said, is how the architect is using the punch list. We haven't used the punch list at all for HQS. And HQS, as I mentioned in our call yesterday, we really look at HQS for the housing authority and for the management company, because just because the architect has punched it out or there's a CO or substantial completion does not always mean that there's going to be an HQS pass. The GC might have only done the scope of work, and there might have been some other items in the unit that would not cause the HQS to pass. But if it's something that it's not causing HQS to pass because of something in the scope of work by the contractor, then do add that to the issues tab as well. And so the issues tab becomes incredibly important. It's a place where everyone can see what's going on. And then you can't deny it. It's not something where Susan's team later on says, well, we told you about the sewers. And I go, I didn't get an email for that. It's very obvious. It's on here. Everybody sees it. So please utilize that function.
Awesome. If anyone has any questions or items that they need to discuss at any point about these, definitely feel free to reach out. I know Joanne's a great resource on there, but we're happy to help as well. One last thing on here, there is a pending only checkbox by default to only show the open items, but just keep in mind if you want to see the closed ones, just simply uncheck that and everything else will populate. We also, again, carry that same categories column. So if you'd like to tag, you know, a manual category on your issue, you can certainly do that as well, and we can use that to filter. But that's it for the construction module. I think at this point, given we have about 9 minutes, I certainly want to make sure we're touching on change proposals and change order processes. So I'm going to hop over here to accounting. Now, the thing to keep in mind is BGC will have the budget set up, the contract set up. They will have all of that set up in OwnerInsite. I'm assuming here that the process, Joanne, is are you wanting the architect to approve them, or how? What's the workflow you'd like that I can demonstrate here for them?
Always architect is approving the change proposals. The architect does get our signature offline, but the architect approves them officially on OwnerInsite after they've received our signature for the change proposal, and then they upload the change proposal.
Okay, so the architect is receiving your approval and they're uploading it here to the GC's contract?
Yes.
Okay.
So GC is initiating, architect is reviewing, making sure that they can approve it. Then they get our approval. In certain cases, Holly will reach out to the Housing Authority for their take on it. And then once we have approved it offline and done all of our discussions, then the architect approves it on OwnerInsite and uploads the approved paperwork onto OwnerInsite.
Understood. So in this case, what the architect would want to do is navigate to the contracts tab. They would want to isolate or find the appropriate contract here. Typically, it's going to be the contractors, I think, generally speaking. And from there, they'd want to scroll down to the bottom where they see these green buttons. Now, they may not see all of them. I have my support stuff turned on, so I kind of see everything. But what what I want to point out is that we always start with a change proposal in OwnerInsite. So it always starts here. And at that point, you'll select new change proposal. You'll input, you could input your title, submit to. Now, I would estimate, Joanne, we want to make sure these are being submitted to BGC here in this field, like you or whoever the PM is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's
Yes. So the architect will always submit it to BGC, or not the architect. I'm sorry. The general contractor will always submit it to the architect.
okay. So the GC is the one coming in doing this?
Yeah. In most cases, it's the GC that's requesting a change.
Okay, gotcha. So the GC would be the one selecting new change proposal from the contract itself. They will then select it from the drop down. The GC would want to select the architect. The architect, and then fill out the request amount. Let's just say it's 15K. Any date extensions to the contract that they'd like, and then they hit submit. At this point, the GC's part is done. They don't do anything beyond that. The architect then will come in and be able to apply those changes upon receiving approval from the Housing Authority and BGC Advantage. You can attach your documents down here below, but once you input that dollar amount, select submit, and that is the change proposal process.
Well, actually, Kyle, what normally happens is you see that little comment area. Then we start commenting and start saying, we disagree, we don't like that, we don't think we should do this. And then there's a whole long list. It's a lot of fun to listen and watch that whole comment section just light up. It's kind of like a Facebook comment thread where you're just there for the comments only, because at that point, a lot of discussion happens. So the Housing Authority will chime in and say, well, we don't like this, or we don't agree with this. And then BGC will say, well, we have to do this because this isn't our budget, or this is required by code compliance and stuff like that. So after the GC submits the change order, the comments begin, and that's kind of how we hash it out for the larger items. Of course, there's always internal discussions, but the comment section is really used in the change order process.
Gotcha. Well, so from a technical standpoint, you guys are listed as commenters. Do you have like default commenters you'll add to the change proposal, Joanne?
No, we just start commenting because we know it's there.
Oh, okay. All right. So I guess for the sake of the recording and the architect team, we'll make sure we want to keep in the GC, we'll make sure we want to keep an eye on those comments so we can, review those. Again, attachments down at the bottom. But let's say the Housing Authority and BGC Advantage are all like, hey, this is groovy. We can do this. At that point, Joanne, for the change order, is that BGC doing that, or is that going to be the architect as well?
It's the architect. So the architect, the way that we have it set up through us is the architect officially approves the change order after they've received approval from us. So usually the signature blocks include the architect, Holly with BGC, and then the GC. And so once all three have signed on, Then the architect uploads the change order to the system and
Okay.
approves it here.
So perfect. So what would happen is on the change proposal side of things, once it's complete and determined to be approved, to actually commit this change to the GC's contract, we'd want to, there's a green button here that says new change order. Select that. It will autofill all of your change proposal data here. All you have to do is potentially title it if you want something other than change order and then the ID number. But once you have that, hit submit, and that actually applies that change to the contract. And here you can see there's an approval process tied to that. But once that's approved, then we've actually committed a change to the contract. But that's how the change proposal and change order process are done from a technical standpoint. From a BGC standpoint, or like the workflow, the GC will create the change proposal from their contract, and they will submit it to the architect. Upon doing that, BGC and the Housing Authority will light up the comments. And then eventually when something gets worked out, that's when the architect will officially input the details here on the change proposal page and approve it, select new change order, submit the new change order, which will apply the changes to the contract. Does that line up with everything? Did I catch it all, Joanne?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right, cool. Does anyone have any questions about those processes?
I think we should also be aware that before the official change order, there's usually a ton of PCOs, which are they're technically pending change orders, but there could be like 10 PCOs and it ends up being on one change order. So just that's not necessarily OwnerInsite, but we should be aware of that. And then Kyle, are you going to show them how that change order then shows up on the budget side?
Sure. They may not see this though. It just kind of depends on
Right.
everything. But ultimately, what we'll see are any like pending changes. So change proposals that have been approved but aren't necessarily change orders yet will show up in column F. But column E will show the completed change order amount, and it'll total by your account that's broken out here and created by BGC. But ultimately it'll reflect here, and you can see it'll align with or sum up to your committed cost, which is the initial contract amount, and then the committed cost includes E and F here. And then from a tracking standpoint, what we look at is, okay, have we committed more to our contracts than we actually budgeted for initially? So you can see here in column C, we budgeted, $251,000. Well, with all the changes, we're now at $307,000. So we're actually, we're over budget there. And then here, how much of our of our commitments do we have left from what we've actually billed? So your 307 amount minus this incurred cost total gives us our balance to finish. But that's what it looks like. Any questions there? It is 10:01. I'll do a time check. I can show some more, Joanne. I could show like the email function. But I do want to do just a quick time check to see if everyone's okay. Do we need to call it?
Dumbass.
My dog just fell off the thing. I'm okay with the time check. If anybody has to drop off, because I know that we want to be conscientious of your time at 10, that's fine. But if you can stay on and Kyle can show you some little shortcuts and tricks, that would be great too. So if you have to drop off, then by all means drop off. If not, I think Kyle will probably get this done in like 10 minutes, right, Kyle?
Yeah, if not shorter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, so here we have the email to project link here. This is actually a tool where we can throw this in the CC line, forward to this, or send an email to this address, and it will store all the emails here on the project. Now, this is obviously a long, ugly thing. That's more like the Grinch. So what you can do is you can actually save it to your email Outlook, or if you use Outlook, your email host, whoever it is, save it to your contacts there as the name of the project, right? So for me, this would be OwnerInsite's office email. Then I can just start typing OWNER in my CC line. I'll pull my contact, which will reference this. So now I'm capturing anything with that email. Now, Joanne, I'll let you kind of talk about, items that you definitely want this connected to. But one thing you can do is have a group email thread and leave this in your CC line, and then just make sure you're replying all whenever you use it for your project. And now you're capturing that communication in the project on OwnerInsite.
Yep, and I've already shared the email address with them, and I told them how cumbersome and huge that email address was. And so what my suggestion was that they save it to their email and retitle it, give it a name. And then that way, for example, on mine, it's Keystone OwnerInsite. And so all I have to type in is Keystone OwnerInsite, and I don't have to type in those millions and millions and millions of characters and letters and numbers.
Yeah. Or if you're an old school type of person, just copy paste it, right click it, copy, paste it in your CC line. Little shortcut there. Photos for field reports. If you guys are going to upload photos from your field reports, or if they're going to be separate from the PDFs or the documents or the templates you're already using, this is actually a great area to come in and edit or manipulate photos. If you have something that just gets rotated, which happens with today's technology from time to time, you can actually quickly rotate images here as opposed to on the field report itself, but it'll link any changes you make to those photos will link back to your field report, your issue or punch list. All of those link up here. So feel free to leverage this. It's here for you. Definitely, if you're maybe just interested in getting a quick look at all the photos, you can do it this way too. Other than that, guys, that's predominantly what I'd like to show you. I will just say, if you need new personnel added to the project, if you need a new documents folder added to the project, that's a request we have to put through BGC. Now, you're happy to make the request. You're more than okay to send that request to us, but just so you're aware, if you're not with BGC, we have to go through them because they're our license holders. So, I'll reach out to Curtis or Joanne and just say, hey, we had a personnel request, or so-and-so would like this document folder added to the documents tab. And then they can make their evaluation as to if that's needed. The reason why we would ask about a documents folder is just to ensure that there's not another place like under the construction tab that they would like that information posted. So it's kind of a good confirmation that, hey, this is going where we need it to go. There will be a Blue Link training based on everything I've heard that Joanne will set up with our Blue Link team. So they'll walk you through how to leverage that. But that can be accessed here as well, that you all will see as well. But that's it for me, unless Joanne, you have anything else. If there are any questions, definitely feel free to shoot them our way as well.
Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments, or is everyone good? Or is everyone unable to mute themselves?
I think I'm good.
David, I think you'll probably be the one that's going to use this the most on the AOG side. I can see you using it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And then Dawn, I think once Chuck gets on tomorrow, we'll make sure that we resend the invite. Kyle, because Dawn and her team were unable to get the invites today. They think it might be a server issue because Tammy and I both tried to send them the invite and they still didn't receive it. So I'm
Right.
going to resend them the invites so that she can distribute among her team. But Dawn, I think that once Chuck gets a hold of this, I think he's going to like a lot of the features and is really going to be using it a lot.
I think so too.
Good, good.
Brian, do you have any comments? Because, you know, you and I have been doing this for a while, or I'm not sure if Lisa's still on, but Brian, do you have any comments?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously this is an incredible tool to utilize from a development to construction past that point. And like Joanne said, it creates transparency between all sides and all parties. And I think it's just an absolute amazing tool to use and really streamlines a lot of processes and just makes everyone's lives easier. I mean, everything is here. You'll be able to access plans. You'll be able to access punch lists. You can submit issues. Just about everything you need to know can be accessed through OwnerInsite. And then once you go through the Blue Link integration, you really understand how it all comes together in the end. I don't want to spoil the the presentation, but it's an amazing technology.
Thank you. We're happy you guys are liking it. Obviously, from an OwnerInsite perspective, we're here to assist you guys as well. So never hesitate to reach out to us. We want to make sure this is a streamlined, experience and easy, wonderful experience for everybody throughout this project. So just reach out. We're here as a resource for all of you. So without any other questions or anything, we'll wrap the call up. And for those who maybe for tomorrow that are joining, we'll speak with you tomorrow.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Are you officially